PhD, which is a collaboration between myself, Dr. Kyle Ferris. I am Assistant Director of Professional Development in the Center for Career Engagement, and then Dr. Peter Myers, who is the Program Manager with the Office of Postdoctoral Studies. We have started this as an opportunity to show more about different kinds of career options available to you all as PhD holders or soon to be PhD holders. So we're really excited for you to join us, and we are very excited to be joined for this first event by Dr. Catina O'Leary. Dr. O'Leary is the president and CEO of Health Literacy Media in Missouri, which is a nonprofit designed to empower people with accurate, clear health information in ways that are making health more accessible, equitable, and meaningful. Dr. O'Leary is a licensed master social worker and was previously, I think, both an alum and a professor within the Brown School here at WashU before moving on to begin her nonprofit work. So we're very excited to be joined by her. Please, everyone, give her a good welcome. And Dr. O'Leary, if you would like to give us just a brief introduction of yourself and share with everyone a little bit about your background and uh, what your career journey has looked like.
All right. Well, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me to be here and have this conversation. It's absolutely my favorite conversation to have with folks. I love to have this conversation. So I am Catina O'Leary. I'm a social worker by training, and I didn't intend to be a social worker. So the first thing I'll say is I started out and I went to get a degree in psychology. I wanted to be a psychologist, and I thought I wanted to be a psychologist because I thought I liked to talk to people and I thought I'd be a really great therapist. And I thought that because when I grew up, my mom was in charge of a mental health facility in my town. So she ran the alcohol and drug facility there. She had 300 employees. And I grew up working there. So my first job was as a treatment tech at that substance abuse center. It was in rural Missouri. And that job was at a old high school out in the middle of rural Missouri. My job was to go work at about midnight, and I worked until about 8 in the morning. It was for teenagers, that particular facility. And so I got to go out there to the high school in the middle of the night, and I got to stay there all night long, and every hour go make sure that teenagers were in their beds and they hadn't gotten up in the middle of the night and gone out of their bed in the middle of the country at this high school in the middle of rural Missouri and try to run away from the substance abuse treatment center. And it was awesome because it was like every horror movie you've ever seen. They were like in this little high school area, and you go to all the rooms that were like old classrooms that had been converted into these bedrooms, and you had to check and make sure everybody was there with a flashlight. And then you went into like the shower room, and that's where the murderers were going to kill you in the middle of the night. And if nobody was there, you'd have to like go out and make sure that they were like not in the fields or wherever they were supposed to be. But I thought that I was going to be a therapist, and I thought that was going to be great. So I went and got a degree in psychology, and in my last semester realized that I didn't want to be a psychologist, because I learned that it was probably going to be more testing and less therapy than I wanted to be. But I took a social work course, and my professor in social work said, you really seem to be into social justice, so maybe you want to be a social worker, and they have a really great school of social work in Missouri at Washington University. You should try that. So I applied to the School of Social Work at Washington University, and I got accepted. And I had never heard of Washington University in Missouri, and I'd never been there, but I got accepted, and I got this packet in the mail, and it told me it was the #1 school of social work in the whole country. And I thought, wow, like this kid from rural Missouri is going to go to the #1 school of social work in the whole country. So I came here sight unseen, and I was going to be a therapist here in social work, and I was going to help people. And I was really excited about that. And so my first semester, they told me that I could do an internship because we did practicums there. And I was convinced that I was going to be in substance abuse because that's what my training was. So I went to Barnes Hospital and I got a practicum in substance abuse and mental health. And I worked in the hospital there. And I did that for about 2 months before I learned very quickly that I'm a horrible, horrible, horrible therapist. I'm the worst therapist that you will ever meet because therapy is really hard. And it's really hard because people don't change quickly just because you tell them to. And we all look at people and we know exactly what they should do, um, but we can't do it for them. And we have to watch them try really hard to change. And it takes a long time and it's really painful. And we have to wait with them. And some people are really good at waiting with them. And some others of us are brokenhearted and get hurt over and over and over and can't do it. So I realized in my very first semester that everything I thought I was going to do was not doable for me. And that I so admired and respected people that could do it, but I didn't have it in me. So very quickly, I realized that everything I thought I knew was wrong. But I was really lucky because I realized that I really still wanted to work in substance abuse. So the folks that I worked with in substance abuse not only had the work in the hospital, they also did research down the street at the medical center. So I took those same relationships and I went to work at the School of Medicine and had my next practicum in research. And as luck would have it, I then got my first job there at the School of Medicine, where I spent the next 12 years doing HIV prevention and drug abuse research with a pretty big research group that had about 40 people and millions of dollars of research. So, from thinking I was going to be a therapist and a psychologist to social work, I realized that I was going to be a researcher. And this is where the PhD came in because about a month and a half after I started that real job, my boss there, Linda Kotler, came to me and said, you're really good at doing research and I love having you work here, but you can't survive in the medical school and do research like this if you really want to do it without a PhD. Just won't make it. And I said, okay. And she said, so do you want to stay here or do you not? And I said, well, I want to stay here. This is really important. And she said, okay, fill out the forms. So I applied to the Brown School again to go back and get my PhD. And I was lucky because I was able to get into my PhD program here and I was able to stay in the program and work my way through, which is unusual. So I started the PhD program and kept my job, which almost nobody is able to do. The downside of that is I took the full 7 years to get my PhD. So everybody else in my cohort finished before me. I took so long that the dean of the graduate school sent me a letter. In the letter, he said, you must finish now or we're going to kick you out and not ever let you finish and come back. There was no thank you. There was no please. It was like, do it now or you're going to go home. And it was not very nice at all. It was polite, but it was like, do it or go. Because they want you to finish, they want you to finish fast. And people who work don't finish fast because they're focused on many things. But for me, I was much more interested in the work than I was the PhD. The PhD was a sort of a thing that I did to continue to work, whereas many other people do the PhD because they're interested in teaching or other things. It was a byproduct of what I was trying to do. But anyway, I got that letter and I took it to my boss and I said, I've been doing all this work all this time because I love it. And you told me to get a PhD so I could do my work. And now they're telling me if I don't finish my PhD, they're going to kick me out. So I need to go home and finish my PhD. So she sent me home from work and I went home and I finished my dissertation in about a month and a half. And I defended my dissertation and I didn't get kicked out of grad school and I was done. So then I was done and I continued my work and I worked and worked and worked for forever and it was fantastic. I got to travel the world. I did research all over the United States. I got to do research in India, Thailand, Taiwan, fantastic work all over the place. And it was the best thing I ever did. And then I left. So I left academia because my boss, my mentor, left Washington University and she moved to another university and invited all of us to go. All of us could have gone, but I had young kids at the time. So I had a 3-year-old and I didn't want to leave St. Louis with a 3-year-old. My family was here and I chose to stay at WashU for a little bit. And I learned that staying at an academic medical center without a research group was not a life that worked for me. I wasn't a professor, I was a researcher. I taught some. I went to be a professor, but I didn't enjoy teaching without the research, and I didn't want to do research without a research group. So I was lucky enough that I got to shift into nonprofit work. And so I came from Washington University over to Health Literacy Media, where I have been for 13 more years. So I've been in Health Literacy Media for 13 years. And I do that work here. I have a team of 20 folks. I run a nonprofit now. Um, the leap was very different, a nonprofit health communications company from a behavioral researcher in HIV prevention and drug abuse. You would probably wonder where you get from one to the other. And what I told them when I applied for the job is that it is um, an easy transition because it's all social work, it's communications, it's social justice, it's equity work. And it's how we think about things that we do in the world. And it's a natural progression and a natural leap. And it's all leadership and how we do things. Project management is project management. And it's been wonderful and it's been a great transition. So that's the long story short. And what I would say is the easiest sort of way that I think about it is every unplanned step was just sort of one natural um, step that was as good as or better than the thing that I was doing. That was also interesting and good and useful. Um, so that's sort of the story in a nutshell.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that with us. That really that resonated a lot with me personally because I wasn't in social work, but when I was an undergrad, I was in political science, and I thought I want to be a teacher. I want to be like a teaching professor of political science. And I go to graduate school, I get into a PhD program, and I'm first year, I don't get to teach, so I'm just waiting until I get to first semester of second year, I get to be a teaching assistant, and I'm like, oh no, I don't like this at all. And suddenly you have to figure out, okay, I had this idea for so long. Where do we go now? Yeah, so that really resonates.
Right. And it's
Um,
okay. Like as long as
yeah,
you do something as good as or feels better, it's okay. Mhm.
yeah, yeah. So we've got questions here, but we would also love to hear from students in the chat. So please drop any questions you have into the chat. Peter will be keeping an eye on that, and we'll give opportunities to make sure that we get to those as well. But I'll kind of kick us off here, and you sort of touched on this, but I'm curious which skills from your doctoral training you feel are most valuable in your current role and which ones did you have to kind of develop after making the transition out of academia to be successful?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the thing that was most helpful for my doctoral work um, was just sort of critical thinking. And, I learned to think by myself critically. And in my doctorate, I learned for the first time how to work by myself. Um, in a lonely way, right? To be wrong by myself, to be criticized by myself, to
Mhm.
be lonely by myself, to get the letter that says, do this now, or it's over, and to have to just sort of gut that out. And, they say, they talk a lot about the number of people who don't actually finish a PhD and the difference between people who finish and not, and what a big deal that is. Um, and I think that's really important. My PhD, my dissertation is terrible. When I get it off the shelf and I look at it, I am horrified. I'm embarrassed about everything I wrote. And it's it's the worst thing I've ever written. I mean, the way I think there is embarrassing. There's nothing about it that I'm proud of other than finishing, right? But there's something about that thing that you actually finished the thing that you're embarrassed about. You like gutted your way through all by yourself. Nobody helps you. Nobody wants to help you. All those people that your advisors, like, on your worst day, they're still like sort of kicking you when you're down, right? Like the person like my mentor that loves me the most, like, I'm about to get kicked out of school. I give her my final dissertation. She looks at it. She puts it back in my box at work and it's just covered in red, right? And so I do all the things she says. My chair, my mentor, everybody else is like, fine, you're going to defend. I go to defend my dissertation. They say, like, when your chair tells you you're ready to defend, you're ready and it's going to be okay. My mentor, who's one of my dearest friends in the world, didn't say that I was good that day. She made me make changes after that. And do you know the changes she made me make were so minor. I know 10 other people that had to make bigger changes that they still signed off on that day. When I asked her about it, you know what she said? She said, well, do you want me to treat you like them? Or do you want me to treat you like you're as good as you are? That's lonely, right? Like that doesn't feel good in the moment. But you learn to be tough. You learn to get things done. You learn to not you learn to not let yourself be hurt by things that aren't about you, right? You just like keep going, you do what you need to do, and you don't let other people's um, weirdness or other people's agendas sort of push you off your path. You just do what you need to do. You don't get caught up in any of anybody else's drama. You just push on and you get things done, and you get things done for yourself no matter what. And I didn't have that. I didn't have that mental toughness. I didn't have that grit before my PhD. And nobody made it easy, and nobody makes it easy for anybody. And I think that's really important. Yeah, right. Exactly. Nobody thinks it's easy. You just get it done, right? You just get it done, and then you're proud of yourself, and you don't ever open it again. Um, but there's something about you that changes when you finish, and I think that's really important. And it changed who I am as a professional, and I think that that was really important to me, and it changes how I work now. And I see that that's different about me than it is other people that I work with. I mean, there are other people that I work with now that stop much before I do. They stop before things are finished. They stop when things get hard. They don't push questions. They stop at the first level of confusion or the first level of difficulty, or they stop at the sort of easy explanation for anything, and their work is less good always. And I think that's what my PhD program and my immediate work after that taught me, is that, you know, yeah, I mean, we're all smart. I mean, there's an easy way to answer everything. There's an easy way to do any kind of work. We can all sort of fill in the blank and do the easy thing. And then there's the real way and the important way and the good way. And my PhD program and my immediate work after that taught me what that meant.
Fantastic. Yeah. Yeah. I think it's an underappreciated part of it sometimes. You got to really put in the time to make the
And
PhD happen.
years. And you have to do it yourself, right? Like, you know what's good and bad. And sometimes it doesn't matter, right? Like sometimes just enough is all it takes, and nobody cares. And then other times it really matters. And you know the difference.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a question from the chat. If someone's asked if you are actively conducting research in your current role.
Sometimes. So when I came to health literacy media, the work that they did was primarily rewriting health materials. And so they got, brochures and package inserts and things like that, and they rewrote them, and it was good work. But one of the things I was really interested in was getting feedback from communities. So I introduced a whole program of audience testing. So I brought that to the group. And so now we do a ton of um, testing of materials and resources. And so that's a ton of research that we do. And then we also, just get grants and things like that from government that have evaluation components in those as well. So we just got a grant from HRSA that is about public education for living organ donation. And so there are research components to that as well. So I don't do as much sort of clinical trials directly as I used to do, but a lot of evaluation in that way. We're subcontractors to a bunch of folks who have NIH money. So we do the communication for a bunch of NIH researchers. So my work doing NIH work allows me to speak the language to support NIH researchers, which is really helpful. And then the third way that we do research is I work a lot for Big Pharma, and there is a requirement from the EU governing bodies, regulatory government folks, who say that if you have a clinical trial site in Europe, you have to report the results of that clinical trial back to the people who were involved, and you have to do it in plain language. But the people who run the clinical trials don't have any ability to do that back, because once the trial's over, they move on to the next one. So they subcontract that all out. So what happens is all the results come back in language of scientists. And so I've been able to get a lot of that work. So we get hundreds of thousands of dollars of work, basically translating clinical trial results into plain language back to folks. And so, I mean, that's research in a sort of being able to take really complex scientific language and put it back into language that people can understand and get it back to folks. And so not only do we communicate it back in language that people can understand, but we ask people in the intended audience to evaluate what we're saying and make sure that we're explaining it in a way that actually is understandable. And it's been fun, because what we find is sometimes people will put things in a consent document or a clinical trial summary of, let's say something like, okay, we're going to give you a medicine. This is a real example. We're going to give you a medicine that's a shot in your eye, and we're going to put the medicine in the shot in your eye, and it's a little painful. And so we ask people, we're like, okay, they said that this shot was painful in your eye. What do you think about that? And the people are like, oh no, that's not that it was a little painful. It's like the most excruciating thing I ever felt in my life. You can't tell people that. I mean, it is like the worst thing I ever felt. And, like 10 people will tell us that. And so we go back to the company and we say, absolutely not. That is like abhorrent that you would say it's a little painful. I mean, these people say that it was horrible. Absolutely not. You can't say this. And so we are able to make them change language based on reality. And that's really important. And we make them change consents. We make them change package inserts. We make them change language based on this.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm
Pretty
glad you're
good.
doing that, although I now know what my nightmares are going to be tonight.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, those little package inserts when you get a medicine, we write
yeah.
those. So we make sure the
Okay.
language is accurate.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, it's cool.
Um, we have another question from the chat. Anissa Finley is asking what your exact kind of role, what you do in your current role, and how similar or different it is to your time doing research for your PhD.
Yeah. So my current role as president and CEO is not similar to what I was doing when I had my PhD. Because when I had my PhD, well, it was similar in that when I had my PhD, I got grants, but I also ran research projects, and I was the best at like actually implementing research projects. I'm a really good project manager. I'm really good at doing research. Um, and now my job is to like go out and get money. So I sell things really, and I give talks, and I go out and like basically tell people like, give us your money and we'll do good things for you. And I'm kind of good at that, but it's more fun to do the other thing. So it's a little bit different. Mm. And I like the other thing better, but it's okay. I really like the people I work with now. So that's the thing that's most similar, is in both cases, I worked with really cool people who were exceptionally good at what they do. And I got to spend a lot of time doing things with really cool people who did smart things, smart people. So that was awesome in both cases. I'm slightly less excited about what I do most days here. So I'm more of like a show puppy here than I was there. But that's okay.
The people you work with can be make or break on that in a lot of cases.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So Yi Chen had a couple of questions. One, if there were any unexpected opportunities that came up because of your PhD, and what your suggestions are for new or recent graduates who are still interested in academia.
Yeah. So I would say absolutely. This job I absolutely got because of my PhD. So I don't have a background in communications. I didn't even know what health literacy was when I applied for the job. I literally Googled health literacy in the parking lot of the search firm, and had to like figure it out while I was going there. I didn't know what it was at all. But the PhD got me in the door, and um, I was able to sort of work my way into that. So um, you know, the sort of grit and stick to itness of getting through a PhD is something that resonates with people. People get that, and if you're able to do that, it tells a story that other people appreciate for sure. I think if my children are home and they are getting ice, Evan. What? Oh, sorry, I have a 16-year-old and a 13-year-old. They're not bothering to listen to me at all. So my advice for new graduates, I would say, you know, if you're still interested in academia, is go out of your way to get to know everybody you can. They tell you early on when you're in, college and grad school to like go see your professors at office hours and do all those things. And people don't do it because they think that it's like stupid and you're going to be embarrassed and your professors think it's stupid and you feel really awkward about it. But it's so true. Like people do things for people they like. That never changes. So go see everybody, go talk to everybody. Every time you have a chance to go to one of the networking things or the conferences or whatever, go do it, no matter how stupid it feels. It matters. When you go to a talk like this and somebody says, LinkedIn or, Twitter or Facebook or come by the office, we really mean it. I mean, like I'll say it, there are 30 people on this call. One person maybe does it. Like one person here will call me and they'll actually ask to come see me for coffee. I will take that one person out for coffee. 6 months from now, they'll send me an email and they'll come back and see me again. Out of the 50 times I've done this, there are like 4 people that every 3 or 4 months, like call me or email me or whatever. Like there are like 2 people that I see for coffee twice a year. I write those people letters over and over again. Those people go to medical school or grad school or whatever, and then those people get jobs. And they don't just do that with me because I'm special. They do that with everybody. Those are the people that make connections and they go on. I'm not special. They do it with everybody. And for whatever reason, like those networks are really expansive. And whenever a job opens, they know who to have write letters. They're the people that get through the filters. So do that. Like let everybody in the brother take you to coffee. Send the emails over and over again. We don't know the difference. Like we don't know anybody. We say yes to everybody, and then over time we do know you. We don't remember how we know you. We just remember that like you came to coffee every week for whenever, and then it's like all of a sudden we do know you. It's like, oh yeah, like Hannah. Yeah, I mean, of course I've known Hannah forever. It's just what it is, and it's like that for everybody. So I mean, I know it feels awkward and it feels stupid, but then it becomes real. So just do it and don't feel embarrassed about it. And like a year from now you'll have this whole little network of people that suddenly know you and do things for you, and you're one of their people, and you have like 6 people or how many ever people like that. And even if they're terrible people, they've like bought you coffee or a muffin or lunch or whatever that is, and they'll still write you the letters. And you've gotten fed and you've gotten letters from a bunch of people. That is like the number one thing I would say. Seriously, that's like it's unfortunate, but the only thing that anybody does to get through any of this is just to have connections. And unless you're just born lucky, the only way to have connections is just to like go out and do it. And unless somebody's just a real jerk, they say yes to everybody. I know I'm just like going on and on and on about this, but I never would do it because I was always too embarrassed or whatever, and I just thought I felt stupid. And
It's such a critical part of any work, though, any professional, place that you sit. It's all people. At the end of the day, it's all people. And I always recommend folks like you should be finding people that you enjoy talking to, right? People who are doing cool stuff. Like
yeah,
find people who you can kind of geek out over the same sorts of
that's right.
things. Yeah.
Just do it. And
Yeah.
even if you don't like them, I mean, if you think you're going to like somebody and then you like, have coffee or sit at their meeting once or whatever, and then you don't like them, so what? You don't have to do it again. But it's not going to hurt you. And it's one hour of your life or 130 minutes or whatever it is. And all they can do is say no. And if they say no,
Yeah.
they're a jerk.
Yeah. Yeah. Say no, and then you just don't have to worry about it.
That's right. That's right.
So, Xiumen Guan is asking if you can share a success story from your current position and what skills from your research training you think are particularly valuable in your non-academic work.
Well, my favorite success story, I've got so many favorites, but I run a nonprofit and funding is rough. I mean, this is hard stuff. So when I took this job, one of my academic good friends told me that, it was fine to take this job, but it was probably good for 2 years before this nonprofit was like down the tubes. because we were funded by the Missouri Foundation for Health, and the MFFH was not going to fund us for that long. We'd be out the door and I'd be looking for something else. And I thought, well, at least that'll give me 2 years to figure out what I was going to do. Mind you, that was 13 years ago. But he was right. So I was there about 3 months, and the head of the foundation called me in and he said, "You know what, Katina, you're a great person. I really think you're cool. I love what you're doing over there, but we're not going to fund you anymore." So they were at that time funding our whole infrastructure. "We're not going to fund you anymore because um, we don't think that it's in the interest of the foundation to fund organizations' infrastructure anymore. We're going to change our strategy." So they had gotten a new director at that point. So their leadership had changed. So they were changing their funding strategy. So basically, in my first 6 months there, it went from having an infrastructure grant that supported our whole budget to learning that we weren't going to have that anymore. And I needed to have a completely different funding strategy. And by the way, I don't know how to do that. I was not a fundraiser like that. So, like, the world imploded. So I had to go back to my board and tell them that, like, okay, the sky's falling. So this is the success story. I was able to go back and convince that guy to give me a 5-year exit strategy. So I was able to get money for 5 more years. And in that 5 years, I was able to take my organization from being completely funded by one foundation to convincing people on my board that we no longer had to work only in Missouri, because that was what was required when we were funded by the foundation, to being able to work completely outside Missouri in all of the United States, globally. Which, when I took the job, we were Missouri Health Literacy Missouri. We rebranded to Health Literacy Media because nobody in Philadelphia wanted to work with somebody that was Health Literacy Missouri. So we rebranded so that we could work nationally and then internationally. At that point, my board wouldn't even let me work outside Missouri. So we convinced them that it was okay. And we were able to transition our whole business model in that period of time. So we didn't go out of business. So we made that whole leap and didn't go out of business immediately. And that was all, again, skills I learned in research of how to think critically and pivot, because we learned that with NIH funding systems, right? Like, it was constantly changing. You had to think about, where are you going to get your money from? Is it going to be foundation? Is it going to be NIH? Is it going to be different? What are you going to do, right? You had to constantly be thinking about where you're going to get money, how you're going to get money, what your research supports were going to be. Had to do the same thing. So it was really, really cool. And I was really excited. And we're doing it again, right? So this current administration, bottom fell out, right? So I had to lay off 7 people last year. We were at a $300,000 deficit at the beginning of this year. Managed to figure that out, and we're back where we're supposed to be. So we're constantly sort of struggling, but again, it's these same skills of, like, being able to be critically thinking, constantly pivoting, working with our team to think about how do we do things a little bit differently, how are we creative, and how do we really um, diversify our partnerships and really make sure that every time we do something, we bring as many partners as we can together, so we sort of spread the relationships. Oh, the other part about it that was really interesting is when we spread out our work, that's one of the other decisions we made, is we thought about every single time we apply for something, we're going to apply with partners, because that meant that every time we did that, we brought somebody else in and we invited them to invite us every time they did something, so that we basically had 3 times the chance for every bit of work. And so now, other people are working for us as much as we're working for them, which is really helpful.
Yeah. I, you said earlier, you're not maybe as much about the asking people for money, but it seems like you did a good job of it. Went from getting your funding cut to getting 5 years.
Yeah. Well, I didn't ask for money though. So what we don't do, so we're one of the only nonprofits I know. I don't ask people for checks. I don't do a gala. I don't do auctions. I don't do any of that. Nobody writes checks for health literacy. We write checks for sick babies and puppies and all those kinds of things. You don't write a health literacy check, but we do, like, go out and do work.
Yeah.
We write grants and we, go out and raise money with other people, and we're able to do that, but we don't just fundraise. So
Yeah.
it's okay. It's a different kind of thing. You have to think strategy. And again, that's the PhD kind of work. We think strategically. We think creatively.
We've got a question from Alex Nguyen. What would you recommend to a current PhD student who's likely wanting to leave academia without any outside academic, non-academic experience?
So, really think about what your project management experience looks like. So despite not having industry experience, you have leadership experience. And what they're most looking for in industry is people who are very detail oriented, people who understand protocols and regulations, and people who can really attend to those details in sort of a really protocolized, sequential way. So start to talk about that and think about that. If you have, depending on where you are in your process, if you have a chance to do any kind of internship, any kind of, summer process, anything like that, go look at industry right now and take that chance. Almost all of the folks I know in industry hire their interns after summer projects and things like that. So go do that. Take a step back and take an internship, even if it doesn't pay you or pay you well, because it'll be worth it a little bit later. And again, these relationships matter here too. So folks like me, I mean, I work with tons of people in industry. Every single time they have a job open, they're like, "Oh, I'm looking for so and so. Do you know anybody?" Sure, I know tons of people here. And all of your friends are like that. We know tons of people like that, and they're just people too. They're looking for folks. They want to have somebody that they know. They don't want to be embarrassed by hiring somebody that's not great. So if I know somebody that I can recommend and that's a good person, they're happy about that. So again, those relationships matter. So internships, if you can have them, networking as much as you can, and again, think about what your skills mean, and those skills you have in project management, thinking about regulations, protocols, anything like that is really important to them.
So kind of as a follow-up along those same lines, how do you explain like the value of your PhD to folks, like whether it's employers or clients who may not like have an immediate understanding of its relevance to outside to non-academic work?
I think that's the part that's really hard. So for people who don't understand it and don't have it, I think you have to be really careful about it because sometimes when you start to talk about it and try to explain it, people are offended by it, right? Like they think that people are bragging about it, or you're trying to be, you're putting them down because you have it and they don't. And just to be quite honest, when I talk about it to people that don't have it, what they see is a blonde-haired, blue-eyed woman that they often think is younger than I am. So I'm 50, but people often don't think that when they look at me because I'm little and all these things. And so when I start to talk about it, a lot of people are offended by it. And so, you have to balance that because because people are sexist and misogynistic and all those things. And so how do you talk about it in such a way that you're putting forward the value to them, um, and the usefulness, the utility of something, without making them feel like they're less than? And so it's really a balance. And so I try to think about it in terms of how do I talk about what I can bring to them and why it matters for their work. And so um, I talk a lot about what the interesting research is, like what I have done that would be applicable, um, what the overlap with my work and their work is, um, kind of what the stories are. So I don't try to convince them that the PhD is useful or interesting, or necessary, but what it is that I've exactly done that would meet their need or be useful or be interesting, and kind of slide it in that way. Very rarely do I tell anybody I have a PhD. It usually comes up separately, as in like when we did this work in India, or when we did this or that. It's kind of like the name dropping thing, because it's interesting or it's part of a conversation, or when we were studying NFL players with concussions, we found, and they're, oh, you did that? Well, we did do that, and it was really important because of this. And then you sort of get around to why you did that or how you did that or what was important. But people are funny about it if they're not in an environment where they already understand the value and the importance, I think. And so, um, it's that social skills part that I think you have to be really careful about, particularly if you have some of the social characteristics that people are already um, negative about. And I mean, I think we all know, the kinds of things that people are negative about, and it varies for all of us. And again, I'm a social worker, so I think a lot about sort of compounding vulnerabilities, and you know, they look at all of us and see different things, and depending on what people think is sort of socially desirable, or what, we have to decide how we want to show up, and what we want our power to look like or not. So it shifts in every room, um, unfortunately.
We've got another question here about how have mentors impacted your career trajectory?
So when I started my PhD, I had um, the person who told me that I needed to get a PhD or I wouldn't survive. And she's been my PhD, or she's been my mentor for, gosh, 25 years, and phenomenal. She's also the one that marked up my dissertation and didn't let me pass um, immediately. Um, and one of my dearest friends. So there are people who drive you positively and negatively. I think I've had I had another mentor that told me my topic wasn't a social work topic, and fired me. My topic for my dissertation was HIV prevention education in drug using women. So I'm not sure why that wasn't a social work topic. Um, but I know, right? Such a weird thing for somebody to say. But people bring themselves into all those things. So again, back to like, you know, power and privilege and what people think. So like my mentors were all really weird. Like I had really weird things that happened to me. So for me, like it was like what those interactions were and how I was able to um still be okay even when things were really weird. I've had other friends that were like had these great relationships that like, were really supportive, powerful and great. Um, Mine were like more of a mixed bag. But when I started this job, interestingly, the board chair, when I started my job here, was a physician, and he was the board chair until about 4 years ago. He died of pancreatic cancer, and completely different, like very supportive, like led me through work here, and um, really guided me in every step of the way, and helped me sort of transition the agency, and really phenomenal. And so, I think what I found is at different phases of my life, I've needed different things, and I've found people in my academic roles and my work roles in my personal life, who've all been really helpful. Um, you know, like even my therapist right now, I would say is like in a personal role that has really been helpful. And so I think what I would say to everybody is, you need different things at different times in your life. And I wouldn't get caught up on, you know, the role of like mentor or advisor or any of that. Just like making sure that you have people in your life who you feel can guide you in whatever ways you need. And if you don't have anybody that's doing that, then figure out where that is. If it's family, if it's religion, if it's therapy, if it's school, work, whatever it is, partner, whatever it is, like there's got to be somebody somewhere. um and it's different in all your points of life, I found.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I'd be kind of curious, you've mentioned how your experience with like your advisors, your teachers, there was maybe a bit of kind of criticality. There was a tendency towards criticism, right,
Yeah.
in there, and I think that that's probably common to a lot of PhD experiences because we're kind of structured in a way that we poke a lot of holes. We review
Right.
things and we kind of get at stuff, and it can create that kind of grit. But I personally, I'd be curious if you found this too. I found that when I was transitioning out of academia and going into, a regular, a non-academic kind of workspace, that some of that bluntness, that I had gotten used to communicating in a way that was a lot more blunt than other folks I are typically used to. Is that something that you encountered too when you transitioned out of academia?
Well, yes. So a couple things. First of all, I want to give them credit. First of all, I think they were that way to me because I didn't know what I was doing. So some of it is my fault. Like I was clueless and I just wanted to get through. I was not like deeply passionate about what I was doing. I was not always giving it the attention it deserved. Like a lot of that was on me first. But yes, some of the bluntness they had was, they were impatient with me and I deserved it first. Second, though, they didn't have a lot of time and they weren't giving me the attention um, that they committed also. And third, when I got out, um, there was a lot less of that bluntness outside of academia for sure, but I have it now. So it's interesting because I find that sometimes I find that when people haven't done what they're supposed to do, I don't have much tolerance for people who haven't met their obligations. And I can see that, the bluntness that I experienced and the frustration I experienced at times was that I hadn't met my obligation and, um, people were busy. I will not say that for the person that told me that my topic wasn't social work. That was on her. But other times, there were a lot of things that were my favorite mentor says there's plenty of blame to go around, right? So I think, in terms of mentorship, there's plenty of blame to go around. I don't think they teach people how to be mentors almost ever. And many people aren't good at it. And many people perceive students learn best by just working together and they're supposed to just sort of absorb through osmosis and it becomes more about their own work than a student's work and they're not good at sort of pointing toward your work and really giving it the effort that they should. So I think that's rough. um, I think there's a lot going on, but when you get out into the world the bluntness often changes and it's not there as much. I think what it's replaced with often is a passive aggressiveness
Mm,
or also often just a passiveness. And so you don't ever get an answer for things. And what I would say is I often prefer the bluntness than the passiveness because you're sort of tiptoeing around something and you just want the answer. So, you know,
I'd be pretty inclined to agree, I think. Yeah. Um, so we've got a question now from Anissa Finley. So, how did you have the confidence to apply for the position of CEO, especially when the role wasn't necessarily in your field? And what experiences did you have which made you think you were a good fit?
yeah. Well, back to the networking. My dad was at an event and he ran into the guy that was the president of the board, and the person said that he had been traveling a lot to St. Louis because he was looking to hire somebody for the CEO of this organization, and they'd been looking for 6 months and couldn't find anybody. And my dad said, "What are you looking for?" And he described it, and he said, "Oh, that's kind of what my daughter does." And the guy said, "Have her send her resume." So I'd never met this man. He just happened to live in the town where my dad did, and they ran into each other. They were not friends; they just happened into each other. So my dad called me and said, "Send Steve Pooh your resume." So I did because I was not happy with my job. And Steve Pooh called me and we met each other and he asked me to send my resume to the search firm. And I did. And it sort of 9 interviews later, I ended up getting the job. But it literally goes back to that thing of, you know, it's all about sort of random contacts and randomness and just sort of trying. I would not have looked for this job. I would not have had the confidence any other way. It was completely random. I wouldn't have I wouldn't have picked it out. If I saw it on a list of jobs, there's no way I would have applied. I mean, I would have seen health literacy and thought, what is that? Why is that? I certainly wouldn't have applied for a CEO position. Absolutely not.
You hear those kinds of stories so often, though, when something
Random.
comes up and you take advantage of it. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. Um, I have one last kind of question here. If you could give your past self, whether as a graduate student or a recent PhD grad, some advice, what would you say about preparing for non-academic careers or careers in general.
Well, so I want to say something else before I answer this question. I think it's really important. So I said, that like my dad knew somebody or whatever. I want to be clear. I had 9 interviews with a search firm, including cognitive testing. There were like all of these other people that were competing. There were like multiple people on the board. So you still have to go through the process, right? Um, but this gets to the answer to the other question. If I were going to tell myself earlier, advice I would have given myself earlier, um, is that idea of like not being afraid and just going after everything. So earlier me wouldn't have applied. Earlier me would have been afraid. Earlier me wouldn't have gone through 9 interviews and cognitive testing. Earlier me was afraid of everything. And earlier me was so defensive. Anytime anybody said anything, my feelings would get hurt, or I would be embarrassed, or I would be shy, or I would always think that people were mad at me or thought something about me or had an opinion about me. And 50-year-old me realizes that nobody cares about me at all. Nobody's thinking about me almost ever. And my job is just really to be as helpful as I can be everywhere and do the most good I can do. And, generally, you know, karma's real, like good comes back around. And the best thing I can do is just sort of be out there in the world doing good. And, you know, by virtue of that, like people know me and I know other people and connections are made and things happen for me and other people, right? And I didn't pay enough attention to that. Like I skipped too many events. I was tired and didn't go. I didn't feel great and thought, well, that's one little networking thing, or it's not going to matter. And it didn't. Like that one little thing probably didn't, except they all add up and do. So I think if I had it to do over again, I would make myself go to all of those little things and do all the little happy hours and, sign up for all the little committees and be helpful to all the little people. And it's so simple and so silly, but they add up and people know you and you care and people care about people who care. That's what I'd tell me.
I'll be selfish and tell everyone on the call that means come to our stuff,
Yep.
stuff at CCE and at uh, Office of Postdoctoral Affairs. You can come to our things.
Doesn't it matter? I mean,
Hmm.
you know those people, and then when things come up, you know who to send things to. And, it may not be a million things, but it's like a couple at a time. And
Yeah, yeah. And it adds
Hmm.
up, like you
it does
said.
add up.
Right. And people know to send things to you because you send
That's right.
great applicants their way.
Absolutely. It just accumulates and it's just like a little network of people who do things. And over the course of your career, you think about it over like a year or 5 years or 10 years, your network just gets so big and so lovely.
Hmm.
I wish I'd known.
I think we have one last question on here that we can get to before we wrap up. Do you still have unfulfilled aspirations in your career?
Probably, but I'm like a serendipity person. So I'll know it when I see it. Um, I think is what I would say. I think um, as much as I said I wasn't a teacher, I taught for a while during the pandemic, and then I had a couple of deaths, and I like was just overwhelmed in my life, and I just couldn't manage everything, and so I stopped. And I miss it. I miss. I think I want to get back to like spending time with people again and like being back teaching and doing some things like that. Um, and I think that's it. I think I miss that. That's probably it. I enjoy nonprofit management. I'm doing as much research as I want, but I miss like spending time like thinking with people and helping people think about what they want to be and what they want to do and thinking about ideas with people who are figuring it out. That's it.
Like that, the serendipitous kind of thing, just
Mhm.
being open to what comes your way. Yeah.
Yeah, things happen.
Well,
Mm.
thank you so much, Dr. O'Leary, for taking this time and chatting with us. We really appreciate it. I really appreciate all that you shared with us, and hopefully, folks uh, got as much out of it as I feel like I did here. So thank you very much. And thank you all for coming and attending this. This is the first, like I said, of a series. We're going to keep hosting this with different folks, and so we would really love to see you all at more of those. And Dr. O'Leary's contact information there.
That
Be the
means,
person who contacts her.
yes, that means somebody should say hi and let me take you to coffee and introduce you to all the people that I know. It's right there. So I really mean it.
Well, thank you so much. Any last words, Peter?
No, thank you so much, Dr. O'Leary, for joining us and taking time to talk with the next generation of researchers and thinkers. Appreciate it so much.
Everybody.
Bye.
Thank you very much. I'll stick on the call for anyone if anyone has any questions afterwards for me, but otherwise, everyone have a great rest of your day.